Welcome back to Askewed Reviews, and as I'm continuing to do so throughout the year, I'm going through the entire Disney animated collection. And so today we are doing the 1942 film Saludos Amigos. Here is your trivia question for today. What does Jose offer Donald when they first meet? The answer will be at the end of this episode. So, with this film, we have a mix of live action and animated sequences. In the live action, we see as Walt Disney and his animators board a plane and head off to South America. They end up traveling to different parts of the country, learning about different cultures, music, and getting ideas for different animated projects. And those ideas are what we see in the four animated segments of the film, including a segment called Lake Titicaca, which does take place in that area which borders on Peru and Bolivia. In this segment, we see as Donald Duck is an American tourist checking out the area of Lake Titicaca and meeting the locals, learning about different cultures, and even trying different modes of transportation. Next, we have a segment called Pedro about a plane that must fly from Santiago to Mendoza to retrieve the mail, all the while dealing with terrible inclement weather and also a scary mountain known as Aconcagua. Then we have El Gaucho Goofy, which starts off in Texas, where we meet Goofy, who is an American cowboy. He is then jettisoned all the way to Argentina and transformed into a gaucho. And it's here where Goofy learns the similarities and differences between cowboys and gauchos. The last segment is called Aquarela do Brasil. In this final segment, we're back with Donald Duck, who then makes a new friend named Jose Carioca, who is going to show him the sights and sounds of Rio and Brazil in general. The original working titles of this film were either Greetings or Greetings Friends, which they did go with that second one, just in the native language, so it was Saludos Amigos. So, Saludos Amigos and The Three Caballeros were both made in an attempt to improve the U.S. relations with South America during World War II. These films were an effort to support Franklin D. Roosevelt's good neighbor policy. At the time, Nazi Germany was trying to gain affiliations with South America. So the idea was, since Disney was already popular down there, that they would go down and bring some of that culture back to make sure that the actual relations that they had with both countries were better. The man who's actually credited with the idea of having Walt Disney and his staff go on a tour of South America was Nelson Rockefeller. What's interesting is this movie is actually credited with helping change the perception that Americans had towards Latin America, as they primarily thought that they were culturally backwards. Seeing the cities, skyscrapers, and fashionably dressed residents really helped with that. The narrator for the film is Fred Shields, who is also the voice of the Great Prince of the Forest from the original Bambi movie. The footage of the team boarding the plane near the beginning of the movie actually had to be staged, as when they came back from the trip, they realized they never actually recorded that when they left. Donald Duck's segment at Lake Titicaca was the origin of one of his most successful comic book stories, called Lost in the Andes. Chilean cartoonist Rene Rios Botiger, also known as Peppo, was dissatisfied with the character of Pedro the airplane representing Chile. He wanted a character that was more iconic, like Donald Duck or Jose Carioca. After the film, he would actually create one called Condorito, an anthropomorphic condor that would become one of the most famous comic strip characters around the world. So, not one of Disney's most popular characters, but Pedro is actually the first anthropomorphic airplane in animation. Now, the name Pedro actually came from Pedro Aguirre Cerda, who was the president of Chile at the time. The postcard that appears at the end of the Pedro sketch is actually addressed to Jorge Delano, who was a prominent Chilean cartoonist and filmmaker. The mountain Aconcagua was seen by the animators on their flight, and when they saw how imposing it was and the sight of a few crashed planes, they began coming up with ideas for the actual segment. This film was Jose Carioca's first appearance in Disney. This is also the first Brazilian character created by the company. In the United States and most other countries, Jose does appear as more of a sidekick, while in Brazil and most of South America, he has his own series and his own supporting cast. He was actually named after the voice actor that portrayed him in this film. Jose do Patrocinio Oliveira. Now, the inspiration for Jose came from an actual Brazilian parrot that the animators saw on their trip, named Sonia, that could sing, dance, and apparently talk in Portuguese. This film is credited with popularizing the song Aquarela do Brasil. Following the film, it became an international hit and is now considered among the most famous Brazilian songs. There was a segment originally that was called Pluto and the Armadillo that was cut from the film but would be released as a short. Another segment that was never actually fully animated was called Kahanga, and this actually starred Donald, Goofy, and Jose. Now, the idea was that the three of them would be playing the Brazilian game of Kahanga, and Donald would become increasingly angry as he just couldn't understand the rules. So, when it comes to the film Saludos Amigos, some of the animated segments are definitely more entertaining than others, and even though on a cultural level it's very fascinating, as a movie, it's not all that interesting. So unfortunately, I think I'm going to have to give this one a 2 out of 5. Now it's time for the trivia question from the beginning of this episode. What does Jose offer Donald when they first meet? So technically, what he first offers Donald is a card that tells him his name and essentially his address. Now, I will also accept the answer of cachaça. This is because when Donald is first brought into Brazil, Jose does offer him this alcoholic drink. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Askewed Reviews, and if there's a movie you'd like to see get a review, just mention it in the comments.